committee. I want to thank everybody who's come out here today. This is obviously an extremely important issue that's facing our state, as evidenced by the folks that have taken the time out of their Saturday to be here. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I want to introduce Peter Cognat, the Legislative Council Service, and issue the usual disclaimer. He's here in a totally neutral way. He knows all of everything there is to know about driver's licenses based on the next 2 weeks that we're going to issue that. Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that there are really, in essence, two issues in play here. How do we ensure the safety of our highways in the state of New Mexico? How do we make sure that people are not criminalized by getting into a car and driving to work, legitimate work? And at the same time, how do we keep from being a staging ground for illegal immigration? I think these are really the two issues that, for me, just bring it all together. And I want to compliment and commend Representative Nunez and Representative Chavez for bringing their legislation forth. All three of us, in essence, are trying in our own humble ways to come up with a solution to these very complex issues. And I think that the bills really, are in that spirit. We have a problem in New Mexico. My problem is, number one, I'm kind of new to this issue in the sense I wasn't in this legislature in 2003, and I've become quite up to date on it, and I would emphasize it's a work in progress for me, in the sense that the more that I get into this, the more complicated I'm aware that this situation is. Because really, as a certain colleague of mine said recently, we're voting on the text of the actual legislation, not the intent. And obviously, the three of us are united in our intent to really solve this issue that we have here in our state. But having said that, my problem is it's hard for me personally to get a sense of the reality of the issue, in the sense of to what degree is New Mexico, for example, a staging ground for foreign nationals getting a driver's license. Obviously, a story like that was in the paper this morning or on the news, that is really disturbing. And I hear statistics, something like the driver's license applications have gone up 22% in the past year. But at the same time, I'm also aware that there's a lot of hyperbole, a lot of distortion. I understand if you were to listen to the radio, sometimes it would appear that you could get a driver's license just by coming in with an envelope with your name on it, if you're a foreign national. I really don't think that's the case. I do know, for example, and a lot of this seems to be driven by personal anecdotes, so I guess if you'll indulge my personal anecdote on this. I do town halls in my district, and recently I had one, and this person came up to me afterwards, and she was just really upset. And she said, she says, Representative, did you know that 1/3 of our prison population are illegal immigrants? And I looked at her and I said, well, wait a second here. Because this is an area that I know, some of you know vocationally, for whatever reason, I've spent a good portion of my adult life working with people with a lot of problems inside prison, both the adult correctional system here in New Mexico and the juvenile system. I was executive director of the state juvenile parole board. So I know the prison population in New Mexico, and I know that in no conceivable universe is 33%, a third of our population, inmate population, both juvenile and adult, a foreign national. There's no way. It's 1% at the most, if it's based on my experience with the juvenile parole board. So all I'm saying is that lets me know there's a lot of distortion out there around these issues, and I think that's the challenge here, is to get to the root of what is real and what isn't. So when I started work on this bill, I looked at a range of strategies. I looked at provisional licenses, I looked at just some of what the
mention, but what I guess what I want to mention is that this is kind of a work in progress. I mean, these are very complicated issues, but it's absolutely essential that we address them. But for example, I read the article in the paper just in terms of how this is kind of a process. For me, I read the article in the journal
editorial around Representative Green's bill, and for the first time I saw in print that, well, gee, we might be outside of federal guidelines with our current rules around licenses. Well, that really got my attention, so I looked into that, and you just get different views. I mean, on the Real ID Act, you get, oh well, only 4 to 8 states have really are compliant with Real ID. Or on the other hand, then you hear, well, pretty soon everybody's gonna have to bring passports to fly in New Mexico. Everybody, because we're not compliant with Real ID. So there's just a lot of stuff swirling around. So I guess, having said all that, I think that just frames the context for my bill. And to explain my bill, basically, it makes very clear, puts in statute the documents necessary for a foreign national to attain a driver's license. It's not just a piece of paper, it's very extensive. It's one form of photo ID, birth certificate, 2 independent forms of proof of New Mexico residency, etc., etc. But what really, the meat of my bill is also, it makes it a 4th-degree felony to in any way transfer these licenses, as the story in the paper today, or that story with the folks out of Chicago doing that recently. It makes it a 4th-degree felony. A person applying for a license in our state has to sign a personal statement that these documents are accurate, and if they're not in any way, it's 18 months in prison. Now, people can say, well, that's just a rule, another rule that can be broken. But honestly, it acknowledges that there is a problem, there has been a problem, and I feel that it safeguards in its way, it's in a very effective way, the abuse of this privilege. So that's kind of in essence what my bill is, House Bill 346. So having said that, I thank the committee for the time, and that's my bill.
Thank you very much, Representative O'Neill. And now we'll go to members of the audience, and let's give this dialogue. Representative O'Neill, do you want to have Mr. Carmine present as well? Or?
He just agreed with everything I said.
So we have the best staff so let's give this dialogue the dignity it deserves. All those, obviously there are 3 different proposals, similar policy concepts. All those opposed to these bills, please raise your hand. All those that are here in favor of these bills, please raise your hand. We're going to, thank you. We're going to hear from the proponents rather of the bills. Please take your time. The opponents are going to have less time. Or less time for each individual speaker. There's about 17 opponents who wish to speak. So let's see how long the proponents take, and then we'll act accordingly. But those in favor of these policy concepts of these bills, please address the committee if you wish. Just regulate your